When Keanu Reeves steps into a quiet, hidden restaurant in New Orleans, he expects nothing more than a simple meal. But then he hears it. A voice. Haunting, raw, carrying something he can't ignore. And in that instant, everything shifts. There's something about this girl, about this song, it feels different. Too real. Too personal. Keanu doesn't know it yet. But this night? It won't be just another quiet escape. It's about to pull him into a story he never saw coming. Before we dive into it, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love stories like this, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, we have something even more special for you. The warm night air in New Orleans carried the rich scent of spices, freshly baked bread, and the unmistakable hum of jazz drifting through the dimly lit streets. The city, alive with music and mystery, was a tapestry woven with stories hidden in its cobblestone alleys. Keanu Reeves strolled through the narrow streets of the French Quarter, his pace unhurried, his head slightly lowered beneath the brim of a baseball cap. He had come to Louisiana for a film event, but red carpets? They never fascinated him as much as these quiet moments, just watching the world, without the world watching him. Tonight, he wasn't looking for anything extravagant. Just a meal. Somewhere small. Somewhere no one would recognize him. And then he found it. A tiny restaurant, tucked away from the crowds. No flashy signs, no long lines at the door. Just warm, inviting lights spilling through the windows and the faint clinking of silverware against plates. The kind of place only locals knew about. Inside, the ambience was rustic, intimate. Wooden tables worn with age, shelves stacked with dusty wine bottles, soft candlelight flickering, casting a golden glow. The rich scent of slow-cooked Creole food lingered in the air. Keanu settled into a corner table, away from the entrance. A middle-aged waiter approached with a relaxed smile, handing him a menu. No recognition flickered in his eyes. Perfect. Jambalaya and a glass of wine, that was all he wanted. Just a quiet night, lost in the rhythm of the city. As he waited, his eyes wandered. The restaurant was lively but peaceful. Couples leaned in close, speaking in hushed tones. A group of friends laughed over shared plates. A woman at a nearby table scribbled furiously into a worn notebook, lost in her own world. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Keanu exhaled. His mind, finally at ease. But then something changed. It started softly, like a whisper threading through the room. Keanu's head lifted. In the far corner, a small stage had been set up. Nothing fancy, just a stool, a microphone, and an old speaker. And standing there, gripping the mic with both hands, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 13. But her presence? It was larger than life. Her eyes were closed, brows slightly furrowed, as if she were holding onto something no one else could see. And then she sang. Her voice wasn't just beautiful. It was haunting. Keanu's breath caught. There was something in the way she sang, something raw, something weighty, something that didn't belong to a child. Every note carried a story, an emotion too deep for someone so young. The restaurant fell silent. Conversations faded. Forks were set down. And the only thing left was the sound of her voice, weaving through the air like a ghost. A shiver ran down Keanu's spine. He had heard great singers before. He had witnessed performances that moved crowds to tears. But this was different. She clung to the microphone as if it was the only thing keeping her together. No hesitation. No nervousness. Just raw emotion, unfiltered, pouring into every lyric. And that emotion, it wasn't just a performance. It was a plea. But why? As the song ended, silence lingered in the air. Then applause. Hesitant at first, then stronger, filled with genuine admiration. The girl opened her eyes, offered a small, shy smile, and stepped down from the stage. Weaving through the tables, she carried a small donation box in her hands. Keanu watched, something in him stirring. That voice. That pain in her melody. It wasn't just a performance. It was a cry for help. But why? Even as the restaurant returned to its usual rhythm, conversations picking up, silverware clinking once more, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling. Who was she? And more importantly, why did her voice carry so much sorrow? He watched as she moved between tables, politely accepting crumpled bills and loose change. No arrogance. No expectation. Just quiet gratitude. Keanu flagged down the waiter. "Who is she?" he asked, voice low. The waiter glanced at the girl, then sighed. "That's Anna. She sings here most nights." Keanu studied her again. She was young, too young to be working like this. And yet, she carried herself with quiet determination, like someone who had no choice but to grow up too soon. "She doesn't get paid?" Keanu asked. The waiter shook his head. "Nope. Just donations." Keanu frowned. "Why?" The waiter hesitated, then leaned in slightly. His voice softened. "She's trying to save money for her grandfather's surgery." A pang of something sharp hit Keanu's chest. "She does this every night?" "Almost," the waiter nodded. "She's been coming here for months. Some regulars give what they can, but it's never much." He sighed, his expression troubled. Her grandfather, Giovanni, used to be a well-known craftsman. Restored a lot of the old buildings in town. But now he's sick. Needs surgery. Won't accept charity. Keanu's grip on his glass tightened. The pieces were starting to come together. Anna wasn't just a girl with a beautiful voice. She was a child fighting against fate, carrying a weight too heavy for her small shoulders. And her grandfather? A man trapped in his own pride. Keanu exhaled, staring down at the wine swirling in his glass. He knew that pain all too well. That feeling of wanting to help someone you love, but being powerless to change their fate. He had lived it before, and he couldn't just walk away from it now. Anna's eyes widened as she stared at the ticket. "The Orpheum?" she whispered. Keanu nodded. "People will be there just to hear you. No donations, no distractions. Just your voice." She shook her head, overwhelmed. I can't. I'm not ready for that." Keanu crouched slightly, so they were eye level. "You were ready the first night I heard you sing," he said gently. "This isn't charity, Anna. This is your moment." Anna's hands trembled as she clutched the ticket. For so long, singing had been about survival. The idea of doing it for herself, for the love of it, felt foreign. But deep down, she wanted this. Still, one fear lingered. "My grandfather." Keanu smiled. "Leave that to me." The next evening, the Orpheum Theater. The grand, historic venue hummed with anticipation. Word had spread quietly among the locals, and by the time the curtains were set to rise, the seats were full. Keanu stood backstage with Anna, who looked both terrified and exhilarated. "What if they don't like me?" she whispered. Keanu chuckled. "You silenced an entire restaurant with nothing but your voice. You've already won them over." Anna took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights bathed her in gold, making her look ethereal. Then, she began to sing. Her voice soared, raw and powerful, filling the vast theater. Unlike before, this wasn't a plea for help. This was a declaration of strength, of survival, of dreams still worth chasing. And in the front row, clutching his cane, sat Giovanni. Tears welled in his eyes as he watched his granddaughter, not as a child burdened with his fate, but as an artist standing in her own light. Keanu sat beside him, his presence quiet but full of meaning. "She's not saving you, Giovanni," he said softly. "She's showing you what you've given her. Strength. Purpose. A legacy worth fighting for." The final note rang out, and for a moment, the theater stood still. Then thunderous applause. A standing ovation. Anna's breath hitched, overwhelmed by the sound, by the love in the room. And then, through the dazzling lights, she saw him, her grandfather, on his feet, clapping with everything he had left. Tears streamed down her face as she smiled. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just singing to survive.